I am going to flip a coin. If it lands on heads, then you become the pirate king. Wealth, fame, power, other things, it's all yours. Whereas if it lands on other heads, the frownier heads, then you die a horrible donut-related death. No time for second thoughts, let's go. So today on Man in a Room, who talks about fictional pirates, we are going to get into a very core feature of this series that is shockingly overlooked, and it is smiley faces. Given that the entirety of this story centers around the concept of a joy boy, it should be no surprise that Eiichiro Oda has incorporated the motif of smiles ever since the very first page of the series. As when Roger was confronted with the face of tragedy, he simply responded with the face of lol. One Piece has always been about subversive duality, which is just a really fancy way of saying two things, each doing the thing that the other one should be doing. The Will of D is a prime example of this. Each mighty D wielder has the exact same response when confronted with death. It's not fear, it's not sadness, in fact, it's not any of the bad things that we typically associate with this experience. Instead, it's a delightsome smile. Eiichiro Oda's use of subversive smiles in One Piece is almost to the point of pervasive, such as the smile devil fruits cursing their unknowing consumers with one of the most horrifying conditions I have ever witnessed in all of media. But then you add in another layer that this forced happiness was made by a substance called sad, which itself was made by a smiling clown. And clowns, they're meant to bring happiness. Instead, this clown made sad, and the sad made happy, but the happy was still sad. Those are the kind of layers that we're dealing with here. And here's where we get to the point. The part where in the comments people say video starts at this time, because you may think that Luffy is the ultimate representation of this smile idea. However, he is only one side of the coin, with the other being his brother Ace, both of whom are represented by the comedy and tragedy smiley faces on Ace's trademark hat. Ace could have, and even arguably should have been, the pirate king, because he was quite literally born for that purpose. But Ace also had the inherited will to be Joy Boy, and could have even been the sun god Nika himself, what with all of the literal suns it is that he managed to craft. Ace's fate was decided in one moment by a simple coin flip, one decision that could have changed the entire course of this world. But first, this video is sponsored by Established Titles, a project based on a Scottish custom whereby landowners are referred to as lords, lairds, and ladies in English. In fact, even my dog has recently become Lord Don Quixote Dog Flamingo, and was on his way to Scotland, but has since been derailed by the Marines on suspicion of being the real Doflamingo. Title packs give you at least 1 square foot of dedicated land with a unique plot number on a private estate in Eddleston, Scotland. And with them, you can officially include the title of Lord or Lady on all sorts of things like credit cards. It's amazing. They make a great last-minute gift, and Established Titles plants a tree with every order, working with global charities in order to support restoration efforts. Plus, I've been told that everyone who uses my link will get plots next to each other, so we could even build our own kind of Scottish land-based Grand Line empire. Go to establishedtitles.com to shop their Black Friday sale and get an additional 10% off using code GRANDLINE to support the channel as well as my dog's ego. Speaking of, Dog Flamingo has now arrived at Any Slobby, where he will be tried on his various flamingo-based charges. So do that thing, but for now it's back to you. Me? It's no coincidence that the very final shot of Bonaro Island is Ace's hat, with the tragedy and comedy smiles flipped. This is how the coin landed for Ace. The happy is now sad, and the sad is now happy. It's also no coincidence that Ace lost his hat after this. I don't know where it could have gone. Doesn't matter though, he doesn't need it, because by that point his fate was sealed and the coin was no longer needed. At this point, everything was settled. Luffy was going to become the pirate king, and Ace was going to die a horrible donut-related death. But it very easily could have been the other way around. So let's talk about why Ace ever existed to begin with. Ace's biology was concocted as a result of Roger realizing that he would not live to fulfill the ultimate will of Joy Boy. Roger understood exactly when and where this fate would be fulfilled, and he decided, hey, I'ma make a special present just for this occasion. And furthermore, when quizzed on who would become the next pirate king, Roger said, and I quote, "The next pirate king is going to be the Will of D. The Will of D's nuts, cause it's my son, ha ha ha." But that is a lot of expectations to put on a child without knowing a single thing about them, primarily because, you know, they don't exist yet. And as a result, Ace grew up in a perpetual state of existential crisis. And one of the exchanges that left the most impact on me was when Ace asked Garp whether or not he should have been born. And Garp simply answered, "You'll have to live to find out." And that worked out well, didn't it? In the end, the answer was maybe and possibly that he was only born with the sole purpose to die. Very Jesus-like, really, which is only made more allegorical by the fact that Ace carries a literal cross on his back with Whitebeard's tattoo. But Ace is that fancy term, the subversive duality at work. He was born for one purpose, and everyone has expectations that he is the one who is going to do the thing. The world government wanted to kill him, anticipating a future pirate king. His late father was certain that he would be the next king, and Yamato had no doubt that Ace was going to bring about the dawn of the world. The entire world was just sitting patiently, waiting for Ace to rock it. The only ones who didn't were, interestingly enough, the ex-members of the Roger Pirates, Shanks and Rayleigh specifically, presumably because both of them knew about Luffy's words and decided to bet on him in this 50-50. But for everyone else, Ace was the second coming of Pirate God. In fact, he was the second in a lot of things. The second Roger, the second expected Pirate King, and even the second division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, which really does cement the fact that despite initially being named Goldie, everything about Ace was much more of a silver medal. But as a result, it's not hard to see why Ace was less than keen in following in his father's footsteps. To be clear, Ace doesn't necessarily hate Roger, because he did get very defensive whenever anyone insulted his father. Actually, defensive is the wrong word. What's the right one? Attackive. There we go. Attackive. Ace got very attackive and viciously beat the crap out of people. But when you've been raised in the shadow of the most infamous criminal to have ever lived, resentment is probably quite a natural feeling. In fact, even considering who he was raised by, which basically boils down to Garp and Whitebeard and what we're going to call the 2.5 men model, both of those men held the utmost respect for Roger, but both of them were also fierce rivals and enemies of Roger. And that mixture really does sum up Ace quite nicely. Huge degree of respect for his father, but also a huge degree of animosity. And on top of that, Ace's brother wanted to become the Pirate King himself, and so Roger's legacy became completely inescapable for Ace. That does bring up one key point though. Luffy wanted to become the Pirate King, which means that Ace never would have pursued that path. True enough, but let's just say that if one tiny event went just a little bit differently, then Luffy's dreams would be much less of an issue. Just like the smiles on his hat, Ace's destiny could have gone either way. He could have become the Joy Boy or the Tragedy Boy. Luffy may have the literal Nika Devil Fruit, but Ace inherited his own sun god-esque qualities. Ace's first Spade Pirates crew member, Masked Juice, was both present for Ace's consumption of the Merimeri no Mi, but also later went on to state that he and the rest of the pirates saw Ace like the sun, this beacon of warmth and power to gather around. In addition to this, Ace was able to win the approval of Jinbei, captain of the Sun Pirates, and as mentioned before, this gets quite literal when Ace is capable of creating miniature suns to use in fruit-based fight battling. Seriously, if we knew about all of this stuff, the Joy Boys, the Sun Gods pre-time skip, then the leading theory would be that he was Ace and not Luffy. Also, here's a fun thing. Have you ever realized that Ace had more brothers than just Luffy and Sabo? During his travels, Ace met both Shanks and Buggy, two children who Roger did actually raise aboard the Oro Jackson since they were teeny tiny babbies. So in a way, they're kind of like spiritual brothers, having been raised by Ace's father. In fact, one of the relationships I enjoy most in One Piece was that very short-lived Ace-Buggy dynamic, because Buggy quite liked Ace. He even mentioned that, unlike Luffy, Ace is a pretty cool dude. To be fair though, Ace didn't kick him in the balls, so that probably helped Buggy's impression of him. But then Ace and Buggy threw a party together and became drinking buddies. Ace even offered to give Buggy information on where Luffy currently was. It was such a strange dynamic, but then again, so was meeting Shanks. Which was bizarre because firstly, Shanks somehow had 2 arms in the anime, but after some initial hostilities, they ended up throwing a party just like Buggy did. Shanks and Buggy, by the way, also 2 sides of the same coin, both with the same beginnings and ending up in the same place as emperors via radically different paths. And I think it's easy enough to figure out who represents comedy and who represents tragedy, which, well, it does not bode well for Shanks in the future. But brothers are a recurring motif in Ace's life. In addition to Luffy, Sabo, Shanks, and Buggy, Ace also had 1,617 other brothers, courtesy of the Whitebeard Pirates, one of which was Izo, which in retrospect must have led to a very awkward exchange when Ace said, "Hey, brother Izo, you know that the citizens of your homeland are being tortured on a daily basis by an alcoholic dragon, a BDSM bird, whatever the crap queen is, and a fish on a lawnmower?" To which Izo just replied, "Yeah, but I'm sure things will just work themselves out." And they did, because Wano is now free and Izo is now dead. But look, let's get down to the important moment here. I often make fun of Ace on this channel, which doesn't come from a place of hate. It's more about finding the comedy within the tragedy. I think that Ace is a heavily flawed character who made a series of unbelievably stupid decisions that ultimately led to his downfall. All fairly easily preventable, mind you. But that's also why I really like him. He feels real. Like just some guy who made mistakes and paid the price for it. And pun incoming, but you could say that Ace royally screwed up here and paved the way for Luffy to become the Pirate King. Despite how hard he strived not to become his father, Ace inherited one very key aspect of Roger, which, embarrassingly enough, was his prematureness. Roger arrived too early at Laugh Tale, and Ace arrived too early to fight Blackbeard. And very much in keeping with Ace's theme of twos, he arrived roughly 2 years too early, whereas Luffy was patient. Sorry, no, what I mean to say is that Rayleigh forced Luffy to be patient. But even so, a coin flip is an act of chance. It's not something that Ace had any control of in the grand grand scheme of things, because his fate was not sealed by deciding to pursue Blackbeard. Sadly enough, what really cemented Ace's death was an event that occurred in a time and a place that he was neither there for, nor did he have any say in how it occurred. That place is Jaya, an island rather appropriately and forebodingly shaped like a skull, and it was on this island that someone was going to be chosen to die. And that choice was going to be made by Luffy and Blackbeard. Because that's the thing about being one side of a coin. There's a whole different side out there whose actions are going to directly affect you. The threesome of Ace, Luffy, and Blackbeard are one of One Piece's most iconic menage a characters. Any action taken by one directly affects the other two. Or I should say affected, past tense. Because our coin flip happened on Jaya. This was the moment that decided who would die, Luffy or Ace. Because originally Blackbeard had intended to capture Luffy and use his infamy to become a warlord of the sea and then initiate all of his dickbaggery. Very potentially killing him, because that's the thing about bounties that are stipulated dead or alive. The reason why Blackbeard left Ace alive was to conjure that war with Whitebeard. With Luffy, there's no such reason. He's a nobody. Or at least back then he was a nobody. And in the event that Luffy were to die, well, that's when the Will of D acts up. Just like Ace's death was Luffy's wake-up call, Luffy's death would have been Ace's. He would accept his heritage and inherit his brother's dream to become the Pirate King, thus making Luffy the tragedy to Ace's comedy. But instead, what we got was the other way around. The incident with Blackbeard ended with Luffy escaping, which directly led to capturing Ace instead. And shortly thereafter, Ace would die on the battlefield right before Luffy's eyes, making Ace the tragedy to Luffy's comedy. Also, Ace died with a smile on his face, subverting the whole thing as Oda tends to do. But is there a world where both survived? I mean, on odd occasions, coins can land on their sides. I'm going to say probably not though. One big issue is that Ace's pursuit of Blackbeard was never going to be halted due to the fact that Blackbeard himself was pursuing Luffy. So when Ace discovered that, he felt he had no choice but to stop Teach right then and there. So weirdly enough, Luffy's freedom locks in Ace's future. Or lack of future, unfuture. And then there's an even worse case scenario. Because even if the coin lands on its side, that doesn't mean doubly good things, it could mean doubly bad things. There is a world where Blackbeard becomes the Pirate King because both events come true. He captures Luffy and Ace goes after him prematurely regardless, thus killing both brothers and leaving all of us at the mercy of a very unhygienic cherry pie overlord. And when put into, well, that perspective, the coin flip doesn't feel as bad as it could have been. But that's what Ace's life came down to. He was a man bred to be king. He had all of the genetic power, all of the fruit-based power, all of the wonderful mentoring, all of the inherited will, and even the backing of fate to do just the thing it is that he was born to do. By all rights, he should be the next Pirate King. But what can you do? Well, I know what we can do, because we are going to decide your fate. I am going to flip a coin. If it lands on heads, then you become the Pirate King. Wealth, fame, power, other things, it's all yours. Whereas if it lands on other heads, the frownier heads, then you die a horrible donut-related death. No time for second thoughts, let's go. Oh no. Well, good luck. And make sure to watch this next video because, well, look, no special reason, but just do it quickly.